They said reunions bring back old memories, laughter, nostalgia, and maybe a few regrets. But that night, as glasses clinked and chandeliers shimmered, I stood frozen in the doorway watching my husband shield another woman as if she were made of gold. The man who once swore I was his world now held his mistress like a trophy. His pride gleamed, while my world quietly cracked behind a perfect smile. No one saw it coming when I reached into my clutch and pulled out the papers that would end it all. He thought I would crumble in silence. He didn't know I had come prepared to shatter his illusion. The ballroom shimmered with gold light and murmurs of excitement. Old friends embraced, laughter spilled like champagne, and everywhere, nostalgia clung to the air. It was our university's 20th reunion, a night everyone had waited for, a chance to relive the youth we all pretended to miss but secretly outgrew. I had hesitated before coming. My instinct told me not to, but my pride whispered otherwise. I wanted to walk in there as the woman everyone remembered, graceful, successful, admired. The loyal wife of Daniel Carter. I arrived fashionably late, my emerald gown gliding like liquid silk. Heads turned, whispers floated. "Sophia looks incredible," someone murmured. I smiled politely, scanning the room for the man who promised to meet me at the entrance. But instead of Daniel's familiar hand waving me over, I saw him across the hall, laughing. Holding a woman I didn't recognize. Her red dress clung to her like a statement, her arm looped around his waist as though she'd claimed him long ago. The sight hit me like a punch to the chest. He leaned in to whisper something in her ear, and she laughed, the kind of laugh I used to have when I still believed in us. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The music seemed to fade, the lights too bright, too cruel. I forced myself to blink, to swallow the lump in my throat. And then, as if sensing my stare, Daniel turned. His blue eyes met mine, and for a heartbeat, his smile faltered. Then, unbelievably, he raised his glass in my direction, smirking, like we were sharing a private joke. My stomach churned. He wasn't hiding her. He was showing her. I moved slowly through the crowd, each step deliberate, calculated. Years of social grace kicked in. I smiled when greeted, nodded at compliments, pretended not to notice the whispers that trailed behind me like shadows. "Is that Daniel's assistant?" someone whispered. "She's bold, showing up here with him. And poor Sophia, she must be dying inside." They weren't wrong. I was. But not from heartbreak, from the betrayal I had suspected for months yet hadn't wanted to face. The late nights at the office, the sudden interest in expensive colognes, the endless business trips that never seemed to end with real results, all of it had been pointing to this. I had chosen denial because denial was easier than confrontation. But tonight, standing beneath glittering chandeliers and false smiles, I realized how naive I had been. Someone tapped my shoulder. "Sophia, oh my God, you look stunning," said Amelia, my college roommate. "Daniel's here too, right?" I forced a smile. "Yes, he's around." Her eyes darted toward him and the woman beside him, and her expression shifted into pity. "Oh, honey," she began, but I cut her off. "Don't," I said softly. "Please don't." I needed air. I excused myself and slipped onto the balcony. The night air hit me sharp and cold, slicing through the perfume and champagne haze. Below, the city lights blurred into gold and silver streaks. I gripped the railing, trying to steady the tremor in my chest. How had we gotten here? We used to be inseparable, two dreamers who built everything from scratch. I remembered the small apartment with peeling paint where we planned our future. I remembered making dinner while he drafted blueprints on the table. I believed in him. I built him. And now, he was in there laughing with someone else, in the same ballroom where he had once gotten down on one knee and promised me forever. The irony burned like acid. "Still beautiful, Sophia," a voice said behind me. I turned and found Ethan, an old friend, standing there with an easy smile. "But you look tense." I let out a bitter laugh. "You always did read faces too well." He followed my gaze toward Daniel. "So, it's true then?" "Yes," I whispered. "He brought her." Ethan's jaw tightened. "He's a fool." I didn't reply. My silence said enough. He offered to get me a drink, but I shook my head. "I need clarity, not courage." After a long pause, I looked back through the glass doors at the man I once adored. He was introducing her now, confidently, with the same charm that used to make everyone adore him. I watched as she shook hands with his old classmates, her lips painted with victory. And then she saw me. She walked toward me, unbothered, graceful, her heels clicking like a challenge. Up close, she was younger, but not by much. "Hi, Sophia," she said sweetly, extending her manicured hand. "I've heard so much about you." "Really?" I replied, shaking her hand lightly. "Then you probably know I'm not fond of surprises." She smiled, pretending not to hear the edge in my tone. "Daniel says you've always been so supportive of his career. It's inspiring." That word, inspiring, rolled off her tongue like mockery. I met her gaze steadily. "Oh, darling," I said softly, "that's because I understand exactly how much I've contributed to it." Her smile flickered. Daniel appeared beside her instantly, as if sensing danger. His hand slipped around her waist protectively, and I could almost hear the whispers erupting around us. "Enough, Sophia," he muttered under his breath, his voice low and strained. "Don't make a scene." "Don't worry," I said quietly. "The scene started the moment you walked in with her." He flinched, his jaw tightening. "We'll talk at home." "There won't be a home," I said, my voice steady. "Not after tonight." I turned and walked away, the silk of my dress whispering against the floor. Behind me, I felt his eyes burning into my back, but I didn't turn around. The night wore on. Laughter, music, the smell of champagne, all blurred into meaningless noise. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, smiling, chatting, my mask perfectly in place. But inside, every moment was sharpening my resolve. I had come to this reunion expecting nostalgia. Instead, I found clarity. By midnight, the crowd had grown louder, freer, drunker. The lights dimmed to a golden haze, and the band played a soft melody. Daniel was at the center again, laughing, dancing, performing. I watched him for a long time, feeling something break, not my heart, but my patience. When the clock struck 12, I reached into my clutch. My fingers brushed against the envelope, smooth, heavy, final. I'd brought it with me weeks ago, half out of instinct, half out of dread. And now, it was time. I stepped forward as he lifted his glass for another toast. "To love," he declared. "To loyalty, and to the people who've made us who we are." I smiled as I interrupted. "A wonderful toast, Daniel," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "In fact, I'd like to add to it." The room fell quiet. Dozens of faces turned toward me. I could feel the tension coil between us like a string ready to snap. "To Daniel Carter," I said clearly, my voice calm, composed, and cutting. "A man who taught me that vows are just words, and love means nothing. Without respect." I opened my clutch, pulled out the envelope, and tossed it at his chest. The papers scattered in the air like confetti, fluttering down between us. He stared at them, stunned. Around us, gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Are those?" "Yes," I said. "Divorce papers. Signed." Daniel's face turned pale. "Sophia," he hissed, his voice trembling, "what the hell are you doing?" "Ending your performance," I said softly, but my voice carried across the ballroom. "You wanted everyone to see us, didn't you? Well, let them see what you really are." For a long, heavy moment, no one moved. Even the music stopped. All eyes were on us, on him, and for once, Daniel didn't have a script to follow. His pride cracked right there in front of everyone. Maya took a step back, her face flushed with humiliation. I looked at them both, at the wreckage of what used to be my marriage, and smiled faintly. "Congratulations," I said quietly. "You can finally be together without hiding." And then I turned, my heels clicking against the marble floor as I walked out. Not a single tear, not a single glance back. Outside, the night air was cool and merciful. I exhaled, the weight of years lifting off my shoulders with each step toward freedom. The city lights seemed brighter somehow, sharper. The silence after chaos was almost peaceful. Behind me, through the glass doors, I could still see the shock frozen on his face. But it didn't matter anymore. That wasn't my world, not my pain, not my burden, because that night, in a ballroom filled with ghosts of our past, I didn't lose him. I found myself, and as the doors closed behind me, I whispered under my breath, not as a curse, but as a farewell. "May you finally see what it feels like to be invisible." The night swallowed my words, but I knew deep down, this was just the beginning of my story. He called the next morning, not to apologize, not even to explain, but to warn me. "Don't destroy everything, Sophia," he said, his voice brittle under the calm. You'll regret this. But what Daniel didn't understand was that regret was something I had already lived with for years. What he called destruction was, for me, freedom. He thought I had simply walked away from him that night at the reunion. What he didn't know was that I had already taken everything he truly cared about long before I handed him those divorce papers. The morning after the reunion felt oddly quiet. No music, no lights, no whispers. Just sunlight spilling into my apartment, illuminating the remnants of a night that had changed everything. My phone buzzed endlessly, messages, missed calls, notifications flooding in. People wanted details, sympathy, gossip. I didn't respond to any of them. I sat at the edge of my bed, watching the morning unfold like a fresh page. My reflection in the mirror didn't look broken, it looked lighter. Then his name flashed on my phone. Daniel Carter. For a second, I considered ignoring it. But curiosity, or closure, made me answer. What do you want, Daniel? I asked, my voice steady. There was a pause. I could hear him breathing. You made a fool of me, Sophia, he said finally. In front of everyone. You managed that all by yourself, I replied. His tone sharpened. Don't think this is over. You don't know what you're doing. I built everything, the firm, the reputation, the clients. I cut him off. You built nothing alone. And trust me, Daniel, I know exactly what I'm doing. He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried that familiar arrogance, the one that used to make me shrink. You won't last without me. You're emotional, impulsive. I smiled. And yet, Daniel, I was the one who kept your empire standing while you were busy flirting with your assistant. Before he could answer, I hung up. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore, it was empowering. What Daniel didn't realize was that the night of the reunion wasn't an act of impulse. It was the final move in a plan I had been quietly constructing for months. I'd known about Maya for almost half a year. The late-night text I accidentally saw on his tablet, "Can't wait to be your +1 at the reunion throwing kisses," had been the moment the last string of denial snapped. That night, I hadn't screamed or confronted him. I'd simply smiled, kissed his cheek, and whispered, "Good night." And then I'd started preparing. Daniel always underestimated me. He thought my silence meant weakness. What he didn't know was that silence is often the sound of calculation. I began meeting with a lawyer, discreetly. I gathered documents, reviewed joint accounts, and transferred creative rights of my design projects under my own name. Because while Daniel was the face of Carter Designs, I had always been the mind behind its success. Every aesthetic choice, every pitch deck, every client presentation, that was me. When the divorce papers fluttered across the ballroom that night, he thought it was a spontaneous act of anger. But I had signed them weeks earlier. Now, the fallout was beginning. Over the next few days, Daniel's world started unraveling. Clients began calling me instead of him. Rumors about his affair spread like wildfire. Our staff, the ones who'd always respected my quiet leadership, began questioning his decisions. Maya stopped showing up at the office after reporters started calling her the other woman. I watched it all unfold in silence, not with joy, but with a strange, bittersweet calm. I wasn't destroying him. He was destroying himself. I had simply stopped protecting him from the consequences. 2 weeks later, I walked into the firm one last time. The air was thick with tension. Daniel's secretary avoided my eyes. When I entered his office, he was sitting behind his desk, looking worn and older somehow, his confidence eroded. He looked up. "You shouldn't be here." "Oh, but I should," I said, handing him a folder. "Those are the final transfer documents for the creative division. It's legally mine now." He frowned, flipping through the pages. "You're taking half the company." "No," I corrected. "Just the part that's actually worth something." He slammed the folder shut. "You think you can run this without me? You think those clients will stay loyal to you?" I met his glare calmly. "They already have." For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not anger, not arrogance, fear. Because he finally understood that I wasn't bluffing. "You planned all this," he said quietly. "I prepared," I said. "There's a difference." He stood, pacing. "I loved you, Sophia. Everything we had." I shook my head. "You loved control. You loved applause. You loved how I made you look successful. But love, no, Daniel, you stopped loving me the moment you decided my loyalty was guaranteed." He didn't speak after that. And I didn't need him to. I turned and walked out, closing the door gently behind me. When the divorce was finalized a month later, the court granted me not only half of our assets but full ownership of the creative branch, the one I had nurtured for years. His lawyer tried to argue that I'd tricked him, but even the judge couldn't ignore the evidence of my contributions. The day I received the final decree, I went for a walk by the lake near our old apartment. The air smelled of rain and jasmine, and for the first time in years, I felt unburdened. I wasn't Mrs. Carter anymore. I was just Sophia. Freedom didn't feel loud or dramatic. It felt like quiet mornings and honest breaths. But I wasn't done. Not yet. 2 months after the divorce, I reopened the office, under a new name, S. Carter Design Studio. The same initials, but a different meaning. People thought it was a rebranding. In truth, it was a rebirth. Clients who had once come for Daniel's charm now stayed for my creativity. I worked harder than ever, not to prove him wrong, but to prove myself right, that I could stand on my own, that my worth was never tied to his name. Success came quietly, steadily. Our first major project, a luxury hotel renovation, was featured in a national magazine. When the issue came out, my name was on the cover. Sophia Carter, the visionary behind modern design. I didn't send Daniel a copy. I knew he'd see it anyway. One evening, as I was locking up the studio, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I knew it was him before I opened it. Saw the article, "You're doing well." For a moment, my chest tightened. Old habits die hard. There was a time when those words from him would have meant everything. Now, they meant nothing. I typed back slowly, "Yes, I'm finally building something that's mine." Then I deleted his number. Months later, the reunion committee invited me to the next year's event. Part of me wanted to decline, but another part of me, the new part, wanted closure. Not the kind that ends in tears, but the kind that lets you look at your past without flinching. So I went, alone again, but not lonely. The same ballroom glittered, the same laughter echoed, but everything felt different. People greeted me with genuine warmth this time. The pity had turned into respect. "Sophia, you look radiant," Amelia exclaimed when she saw me. "Freedom suits me," I said with a smile. And then I saw him. Daniel, standing near the bar, looking smaller somehow. The mistress was gone. His laughter, the one that once filled rooms, was quieter now, almost forced. Our eyes met briefly, and I felt nothing. No hate, no anger, just a quiet acceptance. He raised his glass, but this time, I didn't respond. I simply turned back to my friends, laughing, my life moving forward while his stayed frozen. Later that night, as the music played softly, I stood by the window, watching the city lights. I thought of the woman I had been, the one who stayed silent, who made excuses, who believed that being a good wife meant sacrificing herself. I whispered to her in my mind, "You survived. You didn't break. You became everything he thought you couldn't be." That night, I toasted not to revenge, but to rebirth. Because strength isn't born from anger. It's born from clarity, from knowing exactly when to walk away and never look back. As the evening ended, someone asked me, "Sophia, do you ever regret what you did?" I smiled, lifting my glass slightly. "No," I said softly. That night, I didn't lose a husband. I lost a cage. And as the lights dimmed, I realized that sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't to destroy someone, it's to rebuild yourself so beautifully that they become irrelevant. That night, I walked out of the same ballroom again, but this time, the air felt different. It wasn't heavy. It was alive. I didn't need to throw papers this time. My existence, my success, my peace, they spoke louder than any words ever could. And somewhere deep inside, I knew, this was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of the one I was always meant to write, the story of a woman who finally chose herself. Heartbreak. She walked into the reunion as a wife defined by his pride, and walked out as a woman defined by her strength. Sparkles.